Chris, welcome.
I am. Yes, hello,
Hey,
thank you.
how you doing, dude?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Long time no see.
Yeah, well, no, it's not true because we chatted a few minutes ago, and we kind of shared the webcam and everything else and things, really.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks for agreeing to actually do a talk. I know you're under the umbrella of Broncolor because you've been working with them, but you're also an educator and photographer in UK. We'll get to that now in a minute and things, really. But thank you on a personal note for kind of being with us.
My pleasure.
Tonight's session is Let There Be Light. Before we get going with the images, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into photography, etc. And try and ignore Noah, because I think you've been around as long as Noah has in the world of photography.
Nearly, yeah. My science teacher at secondary school actually gave me the bug. One day, I think it was probably just before the summer holidays when he didn't have much to do, he brought in some exposed pictures in a bag and processed them in front of us, and just to see that image appear in the tray was just magical to me. And I've never been much of an artist or painter or drawer. I could never get the hang of that. So it automatically went to photography, and started off with a home darkroom with a board across the top of the bath, as most people do, and get shouted at for taking up too much time in the bathroom. But then when I left school, I didn't really know quite what I was wanting to do. School wasn't my favorite thing. And a friend of mine actually started work in a camera shop, so they were looking for staff, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll give that a try. So I worked in a camera shop, which again sort of bucked me up for my interest in photography, and got myself a nice camera. I had a Pentax Spotmatic, which was the top of the range when I was that age, and everyone was saying, wow, that's fantastic, you know. And I was doing my own processing and so on. And I did that quite a long time, and then I was speaking to one of the sales reps that came into the shop, and he said, "Oh, we're looking for some salespeople for our company," and they were a photographic company, obviously. So I became a sales rep and got into it more and more. Then found that I was working alongside photographers, doing workshops and demonstrations and supplying equipment for the older generation amongst us. Courtney Lighting, crikey, that's going back a bit.
Yeah.
An old British make of Studio Flash, and I worked with them, and I started doing the RPS lighting workshops, and I've been doing those since the mid 80s. Goodness me, that's a long time ago. And then I eventually joined Elinchrom, and I worked for Elinchrom many years, which is where I think we first met. Yeah. And we had quite a long relationship with you and Elinchrom. And after that, I had a spell selling Hensel lighting from Germany, which was very short. And then I was offered a job at Broncolor when Hasselblad became the agency for Broncolor. And I was asked if I would like to come and be their sales manager and technical support, which I jumped at, of course. And since then, there's been 2 other distributors, and I now work for a company called Transcontinental, who are the UK distributor for Broncolor. I'm part-time now as a lighting consultant, so I do the demonstrations, I do training, I do workshops, technical support, that sort of thing. But I also still run my own courses, which we'll talk about later. This is where I do most of my photography, to be honest, these days. I don't really have a lot of time to actually do my own personal stuff. So it tends to be when I'm teaching, either one-to-one or on workshops.
Very good.
So that's me, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you were the guy that convinced me to move from Bowens to Elinchrom.
Well, yeah, of course.
I had a huge amount of Bowens stuff at the time. So Bowens is no longer now, are they? But you were going, come on, Mark, you know, we're going to get this relationship going. And basically, I think that's 15 years on now. I'm back.
I remember, yeah.
What the weird was part, I was originally Elinchrom, and then I moved to Bowens, and then I came back from Bowens to Elinchrom. So that was I'm sure we talked about that quite a lot. But thanks for the introduction to Elinchrom and things. Really. Chris, before we get into kind of the photography tonight, because I know that we're going to start off with some technical stuff. Before we frighten everybody with that, let's talk about how Flash has changed in the past kind of almost 4 or 5 decades for you. How have you seen the world of Flash change? Because I mean, even in mine, which is 4 decades, it's incredible. But from a technical point of view, how have you seen it change from both the low end and the high end, you know?
Changed massively on both ends. In the past, when I first started, the sort of smallest flash head that people were using was about 800 watt seconds, joules, whatever you want to call them, going up to maybe 6K, and plugging 2 or 3 6K packs together and having massive amounts of power. And of course, I remember the old Courtney flash used to have full and half power, and that was it.
Yeah.
You could switch them down by 1 f-stop, and that was it. And everyone managed very well with that. I don't know how, but fundamentally, Flash is Flash. The way that the Flash works is actually quite interesting. And as you said, I don't want to frighten people, but if you're in the market and looking into getting into Flash, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of, just so that you know what to look for when you're buying Flash. The range of products now is massive. Everything from very inexpensive stuff. I mean, I've seen people buy stuff on eBay with no name on it, and you know, some of it works and some of it doesn't, and some of it works better than others. But the main brands these days, I mean, things like the Chinese brand Godox is available in different badges with different names on them, and then you go up to the sort of more serious type work with people like Elinchrom, who are always a recommended second choice. If I get customers on my course and Broncolor seems to be way out of their price range or budget, first, certainly to start with, I always recommend Elinchrom as a second choice because it is a good product. It's very stable, it's very consistent, and it's a little bit more affordable than Broncolor. And these days you get massive range of power on these lights, because with digital photography you need so little light quite often, and for close portrait work or macro work, you can turn these new lights down to very tiny powers. I mean, one of our monoblocks goes down to 2 watt seconds, could you believe? I mean, it's just such a tiny amount of light. But then it goes up to 400 watt seconds, in 1/10 of a stop at a time. So you've got this massive range to work with, whether you're doing close work or portraits or whatever. And don't forget that you don't need massive powers normally for portrait work, because it's nice to have that sort of mid-range f-stop that you're working with to give a nice depth of field, so you can throw backgrounds out of focus and things like that. So it has changed massively, and the range is bigger, the control is bigger, more usable, and in many cases you can get started with Studio Flash in a much cheaper way than you could ever before.
And of course we've got triggering, which has changed as well, hasn't it? Once upon a time, you'd have to be a magic eye, so you'd have to fire a flash to send a flash off, or you'd actually be on a cable and so on with you and things really. Whereas today, you know, the likes of the triggering systems that are out there and all, it has really made photography so much simpler. You know, one of my friends, he's a big Broncolor man. We were chatting about him beforehand, but I was at his studio the other day, and we were chatting about light meters. I won't explain why, but and he was saying, I can't remember the last time I used one. He said, I basically take a shot, look at it on screen, look at the histogram, and basically know what it's going to do before I even see the image come up, because I'm using the same kit. And he doesn't move out of his studio though, and he knows what a different reflector dish or a softbox does, as basically adapts it and so on with it. But when you're getting going in photography, you know, that's the one good thing about digital, I'm sure you agree, is that you can see the result, whereas once upon a time,
it's instant, isn't it?
Use a meter. You had to use a meter no matter what, because otherwise you didn't know your mistakes until either you'd shot a Polaroid or you actually had your film back and it was all crap.
Or
but
you had to wait a
you
week
can pretty
to
much
do
get
that.
away without it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Doing
Lots of
weddings
questions.
and things like that was a nightmare.
Oh, yeah. We've got lots of questions coming in already. We won't tackle those yet. But guys, if you're live with us, remember in the question panel, you can get them in to us as we're going through. Okay, so don't be shy, even though we've got loads.
Yeah.
Chris, I know we're going to talk about the lighting workshop soon and everything else with it and things really. But if you don't all hang around with us until the end, your workshops are based where, Chris, now?
We run them all over the place. I mean, the RPS websites used to be all in Laycock in Wiltshire, which obviously, as some people might know, is the birthplace of the negative positive process with William Henry Fox Talbot and all that.
Yeah.
And we use one of the barns in Laycock to do the course there. So it's a beautiful place to run a photographic course. And I still run my basic courses there. But my more advanced beauty and fashion courses, I tend to run in pro studios, and we run those in different places around the UK.
Brilliant. I'm just going to put a post out, guys, to Chris's site and things really. So just so you've got it and things ready. Right, should we frighten them to death?
Yep. I'll try not to get too
I've
technical.
never started a talk photography with a diagram before, so that's why I wanted to give you a workshop page before we even got anywhere, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, don't panic. It's only a very brief little discussion about things like flash durations and so on. Because if you know about studio lighting, you'll know that in the studio, the flash duration of the flash becomes the shutter speed. The shutter speed is, especially on a DSLR camera where you're using focal plane shutter, the focal plane shutter can only work up to a certain speed, normally about 200, 250th, to synchronize with the flash. That's to make sure that the shutter blinds are open fully when the flash fires. Otherwise, you get black lines top and bottom. So it's important to know, depending on what sort of photography you're going to do, how you gauge what flash duration a certain light has. Now, if you fire a flash and you plot it on a graph, this is what it looks like, a conventional flash. It starts off with a very fast, very high peak. When it gets to the top, it then just starts to decay, and you get this ski slope effect as the flash starts to decay. Now, most flash durations are measured at what's called T0.5. You can see that on the red. And that's a method of measuring flash duration where they take it when it gets to 50% and they draw a line across to the decaying arc, and that is what people will tell you that the flash duration is. But in fact, it's only half the light, 40% unaccounted light when you think about T0.5. The other way of measuring flash is T0.1, which takes a reading from 10% across to the end of the arc, which is all the usable light. So a T05 measurement, it looks good, but it actually isn't that accurate because it's only half the light. And you've got this slowly decaying light at the end, so it can give you smeared reflections on a moving subject, for example, because the light is actually decaying as the item moves. So if we can go to the next slide. So, and sorry to talk about Broncolor a bit, but it's important to know the difference, the way they control their flash curve, is that conventional flash had this ski slope effect, and Bron had this system called the Bron cutoff system, where the light intensity peaks, starts to drop, and then chops, it cuts. We still keep the same amount of light, we still keep the same consistent colors in the light, we don't lose any of the warm colors at the end, but it's a very clever way of cutting the flash so that the flash has a very fast start and a very fast finish, which makes things look crisper, sharper, and if you're freezing motion, like water splashing or something moving very fast, you get a crisper, sharper image. So that's the Bron cutoff system. And I think Broncolor is the only, I might be wrong, but the only company that actually work that. It's actually a protected system that we have. Now, technology, as you said, has moved on massively. And although this is probably not much of an interest to your to viewers, we have a new pack system called the Satos. I don't know whether you've seen it, but the way the flash duration is, or the way the flash curve is controlled, is just unbelievable, and it's totally unique. So if you can swap the next slide, this is how it works. There is no ski slope. The flash starts at the very bottom, it flies up to the top, and then you've got this constant current plateau that they call it, and then it stops. So there's no ski slope, it's just a straight plateau of consistent light, and then it drops. So that is just unique. It's unbelievable the way they've done it. It's taken 5 years for them to come out with this flash pack, and it's just absolutely incredible.
And so, is this the future of pretty much all Broncolor, do you believe now?
I think it might be, yeah. I think that, you know, the way they've got this technology now is just far and above anything else that's on the market. It's such a unique idea, the way they do this. I don't know if it's protected. Maybe somebody else will come up with a similar system, but it means that you've got totally consistent color, totally consistent exposures, and a fast drop off of the flash at the end. So especially for moving subjects, absolutely perfect, and for creating absolute correct color. That we do a lot of business with people like cultural heritage, art galleries, fabric manufacturers, to actually be able to produce absolutely correct colors first time round.
Brilliant. Do you think this technology would have come about? That's a stupid question, I suppose. This is one of mine, obviously. Do you think this technology would have come about if digital hadn't come along? Do you think the demands of what, you know, the flash, do you think we would have still got here?
I don't think so. I think it's all part of it. You know, all the flash units now are digitally controlled. There's no analog systems in them, so it all works digitally as well. And of course, we have the digital app on all our heads that you can download a free app and control all your lights from a phone or a tablet or a desktop. Yeah, which is amazing.
Brilliant. And you were telling me before we went live that pretty much everything is built in Swiss now still, yes?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the components come from all around the world. We try to use as many European components as possible, but for example, one of our packs called the Scoro, I'm told has 2,000 components in it. And I mean, it's just amazing. Broncolor make their own circuit boards. Everything is designed and hand built. I mean, circuit boards come through a machine, but everything is hand constructed, hand assembled, tested at every point of contact throughout the process. And all the R&D comes from our team in Switzerland as well. And so they've been working on this new pack for 5 years, and I'm sure they're not sitting around drinking coffee. I'm sure they're working on some amazing products to come yet.
So in case photographers are not aware what a pack is, we're talking about the power is down on the ground, whereas basically a monoblock, basically all the power is with the flash head.
It's so inside the head you plug into the main, everything, the power generation, the control, everything is actually enclosed in one head. With a power generator or pack, you have the pack on the floor, you can plug several heads into it, and the heads can be controlled individually through the pack, and you tend to get much higher power through packs. We do a 1200, a 1600 and a 3200 watt-second pack, and you can share that information, or sorry, share that power through up to 3 heads in the pack.
So if you had an 8,000 or 6,000 pack, you could either shoot one head on 6,000, 2 heads on 3,000 each, or 3 heads on 2,000 each, if that was allowed, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. You can just share them. As long as you don't go above the absolute maximum, you can share them whichever power through whichever outlet you wish.
And can those splits be controlled individually now? Because once upon a time, you had one head in, it took all the power. You basically put another head in, it just split the power in half, didn't it? And so on with it. Is that controllable on each now?
Nowadays, it's completely adjustable for each head. You can put whatever power you like through each head, as long as you don't go above the 32 or 16, whatever the maximum power of that pack is.
Brilliant. Good. Anybody wants any more kind of techie thing, we'll kind of cover that as we're going along anyway. Chris, what kind of images are we going to be looking at tonight? I've got portraits. I know that's pretty much most of the courses that we've kind of you do.
I mean, I specialise in portrait photography and fashion and beauty. The RPS courses did include a fine art nude course, which isn't running at the moment. We're having a little bit of problem with numbers with courses with the current economic climate, but I'm sure that will happen again. So we do a fine art nude course with the RPS, but my courses we do a basic, and that's really for people who have never worked in a studio, don't understand how light works, and we start off with a simple angle poised lamp and move up to on camera flash, off camera, and then a really budget priced light to set up some really simple, easy portraits that you can do with your family or your friends, or even earn a few pennies with it, you know, if you wanted to. We do an intermediate course which goes on from that, and we haven't got one of those booked yet, but we do, the next one we do is an advanced fashion and beauty course, which is really about beauty photography, beauty portraiture, and then we do a bit of fashion at the end, as if we were shooting on a catalogue or something like that. We set it up as if we were shooting a clothing catalogue.
Brilliant. And those courses can be found on there anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah, so you can book online.
Just scroll down to the bottom of the page.
Available. And you'll find the next basic course is the 5th of May in Laycock. And then we have an advanced beauty fashion course in Swindon on the 8th of June. We do these in a professional studio. And then we do the 7th of September in Milton Keynes, or near Milton, it's Old Stratford near Milton Keynes.
Brilliant.
So
okay, let's get going, shall we? So image one, talk us through this one.
Okay, this is done on my basic portrait course. It was actually on one of the RPS courses, but it's actually a very basic lighting setup. It's sort of a beauty shot. I love the way that the lighting is just so clean and crisp, and the reflections in the eyes are beautiful. Some people get very hung up about multi-reflections in the eyes. I don't have a problem with it, and most of the portraits these days have multiple reflections in the eyes. I don't think it's an issue, but some people don't, and if you don't like it, then don't do it. Simple as that. But this is taken with two lights. On the right hand side, the main light, you can see that the light has some bleeding on the cheek and the nose. On the right hand side is a 60 by 60 centimeter softbox. Very close, very soft diffused light. On the left hand side is just a white reflector panel. A white reflector panel bouncing the light back from the softbox into that shaded side. And of course, the reflector panel can never be as bright as the light source because it's reflected light. It makes no difference to the exposure because you're not adding light to it, you're just bouncing what's already there. And then above from the back on the other side, you can see the hair light shining on the hair. That is, I'm not sure whether it's a snoot or a honeycomb grid. It's one of the two. I tend to use honeycomb grids these days for individual hair lights. For couples, families, I use a softbox for a hair light because it's just got a bigger spread. And it's very important not to burn out that hair with a hair light. We need a highlight on it. If you don't light hair, I've found that it goes very dull. Even blonde hair, to a certain extent, the light is absorbed by the hair. It doesn't show the texture, doesn't show the color. So it's always a good idea to put a bit of light on the hair to give a bit of a highlight, but you must be very careful not to burn it out. You don't want to lose any detail in there. And if you're able to enlarge that up, you'll be able to see that there's still detail in the lightest part of that. Now,
can you
people
explain?
think.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to start some of the questions. The questions are flowing through. Can you explain the concept of key and fill, please?
Yep. In this case, the key is the softbox on the right, and then the reflector is being the fill. You don't need to have a light to be a fill light. You can just use the light that's already there to bounce it back where you want it, and that becomes the fill. And of course, the closer that you have the reflector, the more fill you get, and the further away, the less fill you get. So you can adjust it simply by moving the reflector forwards and backwards. Very important that we also have the reflector in the correct place. If you have it too far round, then you put more light on the side of the head than you do on the front corner. So you end up with the light coming round, getting darker, and then getting lighter again, which never looks very good. Looks like a bit of a corner, and people don't usually have corners on their faces. So by adding the softbox, in this case is, let me get the angle right, this side here at this angle, and then the reflector is at this angle from the other side as well, and then the hair light is up the top coming down. People have lots of misconceptions about softboxes. They think that if they buy a softbox, it's always going to give them soft light. But light, the softness of the light, the least contrast of the light is when it's a big light source and when it's softer. I always liken it to a day outside. On a summer's day, you've got one light source, which is the sun. Now, we all know the sun is massive, but because it's so far away, it becomes a point source of light. It's a tiny light. So you get very hard shadows with sharp edges on the shadows, very, very high contrast. On a day, normal summer's day, when you have cloud cover all over the dome of the sky, then the whole dome of the sky becomes the light source. So you get this beautiful soft light, and it's got hardly any shadows, and any shadows you have got very soft diffused edges. So it's all about the size of the light source, really. If I put a softbox 10 feet away, it would be high contrast. If I put it 1 foot away, it would be very soft. So the bigger the softbox, the further away you can use it and still retain the softness.
George has just said, can you send some clouds to Italy, please, in summer?
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, yeah, we used to do a lot of wedding photography. On a wedding morning, you wake up and there's brilliant sun, blue sky, and you think, oh no, and the bride gets up and thinks, thank you, it's wonderful, but it's horrible for photographers. Trying to photograph a white dress and a black suit in high contrast light is absolutely a nightmare. So yeah, so the same in the studio. Big light makes it softer, small light makes it harder. And when we say hard and soft, we mean high contrast, low contrast.
Can you give some advice on how lighting affects various skin tones, and how critical is it in flattering portraits?
I don't find it that much of a problem, to be honest. As long as you get your exposure right. I mean, everyone has got a totally different skin tone, and photographing black skin is one of my all-time favorite things to do, because black skin photographs so beautifully, and it's so, I suppose the old term is photogenic, and a lovely soft light on a female portrait or a child gives a smashing skin tone. Obviously, darker skin reflects light less than light skin, so you have to look at your exposure. This is all coming back to what I said about the exposure being needs to be correct to do it. But I don't think there's too much of an issue as long as you work on your exposure. Now, I'm old school. I use a meter. most of the people I know, most of the people that do workshops, is, oh, I don't use a meter, I just take a picture and that. And that's great if you've got your own lighting, like your friend, working in the studio, you've been using the lighting all your life, you know approximately what it's going to be, and you can get pretty close even without doing any tests. You can do a quick test and just confirm. But if you're working in a different environment, you've got a different skin tone on your subjects, then I always think, get it right in the camera. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, oh, sorry, I'll fix it in Photoshop afterwards. To me, that's wrong, because I was brought up with print film and slide film where you had to get the exposure correct in the first place. So get it right in camera. Whatever you can do afterwards is a bonus. This
Brilliant.
has had no Photoshop whatsoever. It's just edited, cropped, and that's it.
What advice can you give me when I'm photographing? It's a lighting question, this is, okay. What advice can you give me when one of my subjects has very white skin and the other subject has very black skin? I think that's on a similar kind of note where you just answered it, but
this is the same situation as a wedding in a sunny day when you've got a white dress and a black suit. It's always a matter of compromise. Using a nice soft diffuse light helps. And I would also always work with the lighter skin person to get the exposure right on them, because if you work with the darker skin person, then the lighter skin person would be overexposed and look pretty awful. So it's like anything really, I always take my exposure from the brightest point of the subject. If I get my brightest point correctly exposed, then I can then adjust it as I need to. But it is a difficult situation sometimes.
Last question before we move on to the next one. There's some people saying already, Laura's been on many of your courses, Chris, and they're brilliant. So there you go, Laura. She needs some discount.
Yeah. She's actually in Singapore now.
I don't know. And Chris is saying, can you do a course in Exeter, please?
Yeah, I keep getting asked that. I just keep saying, if I get enough people, I will.
Chris, what question now? What before we move on to the next image, what are your favorite light modifiers besides for a softbox?
Excuse me. My very favorite is actually a softbox. It's a 90 by 120 softbox. That's my very favorite light modifier. But apart from that, I love beauty dishes. Beauty dishes give us superb light, and being the technical support and rep for Broncolor, I get to use all the nice exotic light shapers like the Para and things like that, which is absolutely amazing. I know it's a lot of money, but you can hire things like this. Always remember, you don't necessarily need to go and purchase stuff. You can always hire things, and to hire it for a weekend is actually not expensive.
Brilliant. Okay, let's go to the next image, shall we?
Okay, now this one is a picture I show my delegates before we shoot it, and my question is to them, how many lights were used to take this picture? Now, the people listening that have already been on my course will know this immediately, because I do it on my advanced beauty and lighting course. And the answer to that is one. Just one single light. And it's an extremely simple but very clever idea. Now, this actually is shot with a 120 by 180 softbox. That's 4 foot by 6 foot, behind the model, looking at the camera. And in the center of the softbox, I have placed a black card right in the middle, which becomes the background. So the softbox has the lit edge all the way around it. And the light, depending on how far away you have your subject from the black card, comes from each side, top and bottom, as you can see, and gives an amazing profile type lighting. You can add obviously lights from the front or reflectors from the front if you want some detail, but I just think that's a pretty stunning look. There's another one as well in a minute, which I'll talk to you about. Now, we thought that was so amazing, and Bron came up with this idea, I think, initially. Well, certainly made it popular. And they've actually produced what they call an edge mask cover that goes over all their rectangular softboxes that has the black panel in the center. So it just leaves an edge all the way around, so you can do this sort of thing. Beautiful for flowers, beautiful for glasses, beautiful for portrait. You can do all sorts of things with it. And of course, all the softboxes that Bron produce are available with all the fittings for all makes. So if you're using Godox or Elinchrom or Bowens or anything else, you can put a speed ring on one of our softboxes and put it onto your own light. And then you can use this idea. Or you can make a big black card and put it in the middle of the softbox. So it becomes very easy and very cheap to do.
You get a similar result, of course, if you're photographing in a window light and you just put the piece of black card behind them, isn't it? So if you just if you're not quite into the flash mode yet, you think you haven't got the right, I guarantee you anything that we're going to see Chris doing today can be mimicked with natural light in some way. It just takes a lot more control and a lot more kind of
this is such a simple idea. You know, a nice big piece of black card against the window and you'll get the same effect. If you move the subject away from the window further forward, then you'll get less wraparound of light. If you put them right close, then you just get this very nice beautiful highlight all the way around the subject. And as I say, for glassware and stuff, it's beautiful. I think there's another one.
Yeah, I suppose it comes into how do you adapt your lighting setup for a different shooting environment. So pretty much you could guarantee turning up anywhere with this softbox and light and guarantee this shot, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's a really simple. And if you want some detail in the front, just put a little bit of reflector in the front. Now, of course, you have to be a bit careful because the softbox edges are pointing straight at your camera. So you must use a lens hood, which I always advocate anyway when you're working with a lens. Lens hoods are essential, I believe. And you've got to be a bit careful that you don't get too much flare coming in the lens, even to the point where you can have another blackout card with an aperture cut into it and then shoot through the aperture, not stick your lens through, which defeats the object, but coming back so that you can probably see the aperture in the edge of the picture, but then you can just crop it out. But then that stops the light coming back into the lens.
I mean, there was a question come through about do you have any tips for creating dramatic lighting effects? I mean, you can see from this, have a light from behind, it's dramatic.
That's pretty dramatic, yeah.
As soon as you bring a light in front of the subject, it's going to be a little less dramatic, unless you're kind of adapting it with accessories and everything else with it and things, really. I'm trying to work through this whole kind of thing of questions as we go through with it. Let's move to the next image, and I'll kind of pick up the next one.
Next image, if we can go to the next one like that. That one, that's it. That's done in exactly the same way, and with obviously a different pose. You can see that the light is still all the way around. It's a little more subtle. I believe there was a little bit of reflection in the front just to give a tiny bit of detail in the side of the girl's face and shoulders. But essentially it's the same setup. And I had my colleague standing in front of her with a board waving at her to give a wind effect. So it made her hair fly open a bit. So we didn't have the luxury of a wind machine, but a big board or a tray or something just wafted in front has the same effect, and is less more comfortable for the model.
Well, if you don't mind me interjecting, one of the most common mistakes as well is if with this kind of image with the light coming from behind, is if you've left your skylight filter on the front of your lens at times. It is a good idea. I mean, I know you buy skylight filters to go on a lens to protect the glass, but you've got to remember, even with a lens hood, that basically stray light is going to touch glass. And like Chris was on about, if you're going to add that extra little piece of card on the front, what that's actually doing is protecting the glass. That's really what you're trying to do. So as long as the light isn't getting any chance to kind of bounce off the lens glass, but that also includes the skylight filter or any kind of filter on the front. So just be aware of that. If you're getting your images and they're slightly muddy, I would try and take off the, just a few questions have come through on that. I would try and take off your skylight filter first. And then in the post-production in RAW, if you can't get the result, there is that dehaze button, and that dehaze will help you sort it out. But like Chris was saying, it's always more satisfying to you to shoot it straight out without relying on a third party likes of Photoshop to correct the error that you could have done at the photographic stage and things. Really.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, in the studio, I never use a skylight filter on my lens, but I always use a lens hood everywhere. I find that is good protection for my lens anyway, in case I have to knock it against something, and it doesn't degrade the quality of the lens. If you've got a really expensive lens, then you need a really expensive skylight filter to put on the front of it. Otherwise, you're wasting your money with the expensive lens.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay.
Next image, Chris.
So one of the setups that we do on the advanced course, I call the Broncolor salesman's dream, because it's 5 lights, and obviously it's a bit out of some people's range if they haven't got that much equipment. But again, hire it. You know, you can go to your local hire shop and rent this stuff. I'm not sure how much it would cost to rent a 2-head monoblock head, but it wouldn't be very much for a weekend. Most rental companies go from Friday to Monday and charge you a sort of weekend rate, which is probably just over a day. Or if you're near Christmas, hire it just before they close for Christmas and take it back afterwards, and you get a few days.
Any bank holidays is a good time to rent.
Absolutely, yeah, because they normally just charge you a weekend or a day rate, and you get it for a few days. So it's always a good idea to think about that if you want to supplement your light, or if you haven't got light, to try it first and see how you get on with it. Or of course, come on one of my courses, and you'll know how to use it.
And you know, when you look at the UK as well, we've got such a variety of camera clubs around Britain.
Yeah,
you know, they're there for communities of photographers, and usually within a camera club, hopefully you've got a good lighter. Doesn't mean they're very good, it just means they're good. But by doing that, they'll usually have shoot days at least once a month or once a quarter with it. And a club will usually have a variety of lights that you can at least play around with, and you can actually kind of really practice your skill sets as well with it and things, really. So don't forget about your local camera clubs at all with it and things, really, because they can be a real great starting point. Unfortunately, you've just missed the photography show, and that's obviously a kind of a great thing to attend, to actually see all these kind of different photographers who are demonstrating and so on with it and things. Sorry, Chris, I jumped on you on that. And so on.
Yeah, it's okay. The only thing you've got to be wary of with camera club and group setups is that somebody sets the lights up for you, doesn't explain how they're set up, why they're set up, and you just shoot. And that doesn't teach you anything. I get a lot of people tell me that. They say, oh yeah, we have studio nights, but somebody sets the lights up and we just take pictures, and that's it. So it doesn't really help. So
don't be afraid to ask the questions.
Absolutely. Why is that light there? What's that doing? You know?
Can you do that again, please? Oh, I just changed the button. Could you reset it up for me? You know,
That's right.
do all the things to annoy. But in the same as colleges, you know, you're only as good as the person who's educating you. So
absolutely.
Unfortunately, if somebody in the club thinks they're good, don't send all the nasty emails to me, all right? But if somebody's in the club and they think they're good, but all of a sudden they realize that they're not very good, okay, that can actually cause a bit of an issue, especially when it's their football and they want to take it over with them. But it is a good way to actually practice the lighting amongst enthusiasts. And I'll give the keyword enthusiast there, kind of thing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. This illustrates how we actually teach on the course with this 5 light setup. So what I do is I just set one light up at a time, take a shot with that one light, get it set up, turn it off, then go on to the next one, and then the next one. And what I've done with this is to show you the build up of the lights. I don't know whether your screen's big enough to actually see the writing on it. And in fact, I can't, so I'll have to try and remember.
My top one is top left, only set to f11, ISO 200 for them all. Middle one is lower light, only set to f4.
Yep.
Top right hand side is hair light, only set to f8. So it's a one-stop difference between the hair light and the key light. And then you've got a three-stop difference, between the fill light and the underlight and the actual key light. Then you've got the top lower and hair light shot at f11. Notice how Chris hasn't changed the aperture because he's put the other light on. Okay, that's one of the biggest. We measure the lights individually, and you set your aperture based on the key light itself, unless there's another light that is going to dominate and become the new key light. Sorry, Chris, just in case we didn't.
That's right. The key light is the exposure light, basically.
Yeah.
So that's what
then you've got the top lower the highlight shot, which is f11 200 ISO, and then you've got two side strips which are f9 and they're 200 ISO as well, and that's on the middle right hand side one. And then you've got everything combined.
Yeah. Okay. So top left is a softbox above and slightly in front of the subject, so that it's coming down from the top. Now, the one thing we teach on our basic course is that by putting a light straight in front of the camera, you get flat light. Imagine trying to photograph a football. If you light it from the front with a flash on the camera or whatever, all you get is a disc. To make it into a sphere, you've got to move the light round to the side, and then you can fill this side. What we've done with this is we haven't moved the light round to the side, we've moved it above, so that the top of the face, the upper surfaces are the lit side, and the under surfaces are the fill side. So this is what generally called a beauty light position. So we'd have the light just above the subject, angled towards her, looking down. And that's my key light, that's my exposure. So I set that, turn it off. Then I have a light, another softbox, underneath, instead of a reflector, underneath, shining up at a really, really low level, just to fill those shadows just a tiny bit. Now, this light and this light is often called clamshell lighting on its own, because you've got these two soft boxes above and below like a clamshell. That's set, turn it off. Then to set up the hair light on its own and adjust it so that it doesn't burn out, it gives a lovely light over the hair and the shoulder to separate from the background. That's set nice and high. In fact, it was a very small softbox on this occasion on a boom arm. And then the big one in the middle, I think, was the top and bottom and hair light, wasn't it?
It's the lower and the hair light. Top, lower, and hair lights.
Right. So you've got the top softbox, the lower softbox, and the hair light on their own. Now, that is actually a really nice portrait, but the second one, the next one to it, we've added two strip softboxes, narrow strips down each side, and we're actually shooting through, you'll see a picture in a minute of the setup, we're shooting through the two lights, the four lights, sorry, all the way around, and the top light. And then the total lights in the bottom give this amazing, beautiful, even lighting, which is very, very flattering. Beauty lighting from the top and underneath is always very flattering anyway, but this just fills it in and just makes it beautiful. There you are, you can see the setup. So you've got the hair light, which is a small softbox above, then the two strips and the top light and the bottom light, and that's how that was shot. Shooting through the center, for the model. It's very comfortable for the model, and just gives a beautiful beauty lighting type effect. And of course, I've just kept the model in one position so you can see the build up of light. Of course, then once we've got it all set up, then the model's free to move, or the subject, I should say, is free to move. Beauty lighting normally, excuse me, as the name implies, mostly for female subjects, but you could do it for families. You could do a couple with a baby quite happily in this setup. It would actually look really nice.
Good. Okay, Chris.
And that's the same setup.
Can you share any tips for using lighting to convey emotion or mood in portraits?
I think it depends on the style of light you're using. This type of very clean, even light is ideally suited for a very light, happy situation, which makes the subject look really, really good. It's very flattering, and it can be a nice smiley picture. For moody lights, then I would go to a higher contrast, much darker, low-key type subject where I'm using harder light. Now, harder light generally I would use more for male photography, although it can be used for female, of course, as well. If you want this dramatic type of light that we did with the rim light, of course, that's a dramatic type of light. And backgrounds as well make a difference. Depending on the color of the background, sets the tone of the image. This one's just got a plain gray, which is a fairly standard background. But if you go for a dark background or a dark graduated background, it can make a shot look really moody with a higher contrast light.
Okay.
Then we move on to
a very similar.
The same, yeah. This is our fashion catalogue type setup, which is shot in a pro studio on an infinity cove. For those of you who don't know what infinity cove is, sorry if you're teaching Granny to suck eggs, but an infinity cove is generally plaster, which comes down the wall at the back and then curves gently onto the floor, and also curves gently into the corners. So there's no edges, there's no edges of paper or anything. You can do it with white paper, of course, but then you have to be careful with edges and so on, and lighting it. One of the things that I have a lot of people asking me about is white backgrounds, because it's very easy to overdo white backgrounds. If you put light on a white background, no, let me start again. One of the questions I ask on the course, excuse me, is if I've got a white background and I expose it correctly and take a picture of it, what color would it be on the picture? And most people say gray. Now, that might be the case if you take a meter reading through your camera with the reflected light, as we've seen with snow pictures and things like that, because it can go grey very easily if you use the through the lens meter. But if you're metering it separately with a meter against the white background, looking at the lighting, and if you expose that correctly, the background will be white simply because it is white, and you're exposing it correctly, just the same as if you had a red background and you expose it correctly, it would be red. Now, people get very confused about this and they think they have to whack loads of light onto a white background to make it white. I found that you can get away with as little as a stop, maybe a stop and a half if necessary, of extra light on the background. Because what you don't want to do is to see any background texture. I often use for my courses in Laycock a vinyl background, which has got a texture on it. Now, the last thing I want to do is to photograph it, expose it correctly and be able to see the texture on it, because that's what will happen. Like photographing somebody in a white shirt, you'd be able to see the stitching and the buttons and everything because it's exposed correctly. So by overexposing the white background a little bit, then you clean it up and you lose the texture, you overexpose it. But the danger is that if you put too much on it, it acts as a huge reflector, bouncing light back towards the camera. And of course, the first thing it hits is your subject. The subject is lit by the background around the edges and through the hair. And then when you add front lights, it adds to that light, and then you lose the edge definition of the subject against the white. So it's very important that you get a sharp, defined edge of the person, especially around the hair, when you're shooting with a white background. You definitely need that, being very careful with the exposure.
Great.
Okay.
Well, that's all our images for the night, so that's brilliant. Chris, we've had loads of... Sorry, Chris, go on.
Sorry, you should have one more with the scope.
With the scope?
That I sent you.
That's all I have.
You haven't got it, okay. All right, not to worry. I was going to just very briefly talk about the scope, but it's something that's amazing technology.
Let me have a double check in my files a minute, Chris. Let me bear with me a minute.
It's just one slide with some images on it, with some coins. I sent it to you afterwards as a separate image. Excuse me.
Oh, yep, yes, there we go.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. Is it on a black background? Did I send it to you on black?
No, it's... let me just drag it into... bear with me for a minute.
I think you better see it easier if it's...
Yeah, 1 second.
Again, this is really out of interest for the technology that Broncolor are working with at the moment. It's a bit specialist, a bit of equipment, but just thought we'd be interested to see it. That's it. That's it. Great. Okay, it's called the Scope D50, and I don't know. Some of your viewers might know what RTI is. RTI is a specialist lighting technique called reflectance transformation imaging. It's a bit of a mouthful, so RTI. And most people in the cultural heritage industry and art galleries and places like that will understand this. And normally RTI is a sort of home built thing where you set up a table with a product on it or an item on it, an artifact, and you put several lights all around it, and you photograph it from different angles with the light from different angles, and then you put it into some software which amalgamates it all to a surface data file, and you can examine the surface on it. Now, Broncolor brought out this a couple of years ago, and it's been very successful in the UK with the cultural heritage customers, universities doing archaeological courses. I can never say that. And basically, it's a 50-centimeter dome, as you can see on the little picture with it upright. And in the dome, there's 48 images, 48 light sources. We do one with just visible light and one that's got infrared and ultraviolet as well, which you can switch against. And you can use it either upright against an artwork or wall frieze or something like that, or you can use it down on its legs. And this shot here on the bottom right left shows it being used. And this is the result. This is taken by Cardiff University of some very, very old coins. The picture at the top, the greeny one, is just normal photograph, and then the one at the bottom is taken with the RTI unit. And basically the unit takes 48 images with a light from 48 different angles, and then you put those images into the software. It amalgamates all those images into a data file which shows the surface texture, and then in the software we can move the light around just with a mouse. So from different angles, we can add extra lights, we can remove extra lights, change the color of the lights, and then we can output the result onto a web page. And if anyone's interested in seeing the effect it has, they can have a look at the broncolor.swiss website and just search for scope. And it's got some amazing examples of some of the stuff that's been shot with it. So we've found uses for forensic use, for cultural heritage, for art galleries, for fabrics, all sorts of places. So Broncolor is really up there with the latest absolute technology. So it's just interesting to see what's happening in the world of imaging these days.
Thank you, Chris. There was
Okay.
quite a few questions come through about accessories, and just by coincidence, you sent me through your sheet, as it were, which is amazing.
Yeah. This shows most of the range. I mean, there are some new bits to add to this, and there are 1 or 2 bits that are now not available. But you can see that we have a huge range of accessories. And
could you talk to us about sizes of umbrella, sizes of softbox, and sizes of beauty dish, please? Those are the 3 biggest questions we've had through today.
Certainly. Softbox is easy. They start off with a 30. These are all in centimeters, by the way, being a Swiss company. They start off with a 35 by 60. Let me just get my sheet so I don't miss any out.
35 by 60. Yep.
35 by 60, which is a lovely, super little softbox. Great for small products or as a hair light. Let me just go. Here we go. Now, as I said, don't forget that all the soft boxes that Bron produce are beautiful soft boxes. They all have an inner and an outer diffuser. They have an optional extra 3rd diffuser which goes on the front, and they have an optional extra honeycomb grid, egg book crate, whatever you want to call them, goes on the front as well. So those 2 are extra, but you get the inner and the outer diffuser. And then you just choose the speed ring to fit your lighting. So they don't necessarily have to go onto a Bron light. They can go onto any brand mostly. So 35/60, and then a 60 by 60 square, 60 by 100, which is a nice little rectangular one, and we do the edge mask for that, so you can use that for doing small glassware and product wear and things like that with the black panel in the center. 100 by 100 meter square, which is a sort of basic softbox. Everyone does a meter square. It's one of the most popular ones. 30 by 120, which is the 2 strip softboxes that I used in that 5 light setup to down the side of the subject. And then a 90 by 120. So it's a little bit wider, rectangular, nice and long. That's 3'9" long if you're in old money. Then we do the 120 180, which is the big softbox, 4 foot by 6 foot, which I used for those edge mask shots. Going back a bit, we do a 30 by 180, so a very nice narrow long softbox, great for full length. We use something like that for the art nude course, so we get a very narrow light source, so we can do some really nice low key, very controlled soft light just on the edge of the body. We do a beauty box, which is a collapsible beauty dish with a center cover in the center, just like a beauty dish.
Where's that, Chris, on here?
I don't think it's on there. It's quite a new one.
Okay.
It looks like a beauty dish.
Okay.
65 centimeters diameter, and you can take the center cap out and put the front on, so it becomes a small octagonal softbox. And then we do the 75 octabox and the 150 octabox, the big octagonals. The quality of them is beautiful. And then we do speed rings for Broncolor, Pro Photo, Elinchron, Bowens, and we do a special speed light ring as well, so you can put a speed light on the back of one.
Brilliant. Chris, thank you so much for tonight. Loads and loads of questions still coming through. You know that we do try and keep these things to an hour, guys. So we've still got about 15 questions. I do apologise, but absolutely brilliant, Chris. So they can find information out on the next courses. I've sent out the link anyway, but it's let me just go across again. It's at the learninglighting.uk. Is where they'll actually find the information on all the current workshops that you've got planned, plus upcoming ones as well, isn't it? Yeah. There's also the thing here. Sorry,
you can contact me through that website as well. So if you've got any questions that we haven't asked, we haven't answered, then just send me a question through the website.
And you can also find the 5 lighting setup that Chris just talked about as well on the actual 5 light setup part of the top of the site there anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So please feel free to actually have a look at that. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a long time since I've seen you in the flesh, so it's a very nice thing to do.
Yeah, we'll have to meet up.
Yeah, guaranteed. Well, I'm just over the bridge now, so I'm not as close as Cardiff anymore, so no excuse. Boys and girls, thanks for joining us live. We'll make sure that this Let There Be Light talk photography is available to the members by Good Friday. So you can kind of check that out and download it by Friday. Obviously, if you're a champion member, you can rewatch it on our website. Otherwise, it will be on the Academy YouTube channel within the next few weeks as well. Chris, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for joining us live, everybody. We'll see you all soon. Take care. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot. Bye.